Without my next guest, there would be no Mastering Midlife podcast. The first time I was ever on a podcast, ever spoke into a microphone, was on Tripp's New Man podcast several years ago. Didn't know why he wanted me on, didn't know what I had of interest to share with the world, but he thought so, and it reverberated around the world. I got calls from around the world from my story, and that got me hooked. When it was time for me to write the book, Mastering Midlife, it was suggested by a mutual friend of ours, Rich Litvin, that I asked Tripp to interview me so that I could get a flavor of what I would be able to talk about, because he's so good at drawing things out of people. Instead of writing the book, what happened was a podcast. So Tripp Lanier is the host of the New Man podcast. So for the last decade, he's been interviewing everybody in the self-help and spiritual world in a different way than anybody else that you saw. So it's been really cool. And I've been wondering, what would he distill down from all the wisdom that he took from all these amazing people and the life experiences that he had, being a musician, a father, a husband, coaching men for over a decade. And his new book is what I was hoping he would bring out into the world. This book will make you dangerous. The irreverent guide for men who refuse to settle is unbelievable. It's everything you would hope for Tripp Lanier. And I begged him to come on and talk about it to Mastering Midlife, because it's the book I want every single one of you to read. Tripp, thanks for being here.
Whoa. Thank you. I got to take all that in. That was a lot. Thank you so much.
I get to gush about. I've been practicing this for 3 days. Like, what am I going to tell about Tripp? Because, almost everything I'm doing out in the world publicly comes from my conversations with you. So I'm so appreciative of what you bring out in me and everybody else who you meet.
I wasn't aware of that. I really wasn't aware of that. So thank you. And I have a hard time with hyper. It's like, really? Do you really mean that? Like, is it that? So that's what I'm sitting with. It's like, wow, that's a lot. And that's, and so I'm appreciating you sharing that one. And two, I'm just letting that sink in. That's a really big deal. But, I sit behind a microphone, or I talk to people, do my thing, or write or whatever, but I don't really ever really see how it impacts the world. So for you to share that, it's like, oh shit, I want to keep doing this. This is fun. So thank you.
Yeah, no, yeah, and you should keep doing it, because again, I roll my eyes at the self-help industry like you do. We were just joking at the beginning, when you start your book with a quote from Rumi or somebody, and then we both write books where we start like that, right? So it's an interesting thing. But why did you write the book? Why did you finally, after all these years of just distilling down all this wisdom, you decided to put something out in the world?
I never had plans to write a book. I tend to throw most of the books that come my way in the trash. And I talk about why that is in the book. But I was talking to someone, Ben Allen. He came to me and he was like, "You got to write a book. You got to write a book." And I was like, "I don't want to write a book." And then I told him, I was like, and he's like, "Why?" I was like, "Because I throw most of it in the trash." He said, "Well, what would be the book you wouldn't throw in the trash?" And I was like, "Oh, the hook was set."
Good question, Ben. Good question.
I was like, "All right, you got me." And then it became a fun challenge, because the truth is that I meet a lot of men that there are books and there's resources out there that could really help them, but they will never read them. So there's all this potential there, but because it's not in a language and it's not in a vibe and it doesn't fit the identity of the reader, it's not going to come across. And so I've always seen myself as someone who's trying to bridge that gap between all of this wisdom and knowledge and resources to the guys that could really use it. And so I guess that in a nutshell, that's why I wrote the book. And plus I wanted to write the book that would have helped me 20 years ago. And the one that would have been fun to read, and also at the same time, like, wow, I got a ton out of that.
In the voice that 20 years ago you would listen to.
Yeah. Well, even now, it's just like, I want to read something fun and also deeply meaningful and purposeful. But at the same time, like, I want to laugh. I don't know why my fun life has to be separate from my meaningful life. Those two things seem to get separated somewhere in this industry. And so I hate that. I'm all about having fun. And why can't our fun and our playfulness and our boldness and all of that be intertwined? And so that was for me. It's like, oh, well, that's my job. That's my job, is to bring those things together.
I look at it for myself, figuring out where I fall in the spectrum. Uh, my job seems to be to take kind of the spiritual, quote, air quotes, spiritual, deeper stuff and bring it into the corporate environment. Somehow I'm able to bridge, because I come from that world, I'm able to bridge the two worlds and bring things like vulnerability and authenticity and the things that we talk about all the time into a corporate setting. And it seems to be a unique ability to be able to bridge those gaps, and you do that really beautifully.
Thanks,
So
man.
what does it mean to be dangerous?
It probably doesn't mean what most people think it means, especially right now in our current climate where uh, we've got a perceived level of danger. Most of us have committed our lives to avoiding discomfort. We've committed our lives to staying safe. We've committed our lives to always looking good and being acceptable. And then we complain that we feel trapped or drained or isolated or bored out of our minds or stressed out. We're in that perpetual state. And so I offer in the book that, well, if you're tired of feeling trapped or drained or isolated or stressed or bored, then we need to take a look at these very sacred ideas that we can't do anything that would feel uncomfortable or risky or might jeopardize how we look to others. And so all of that stuff's dangerous. Oh no, what if I might be uncomfortable. I might lose a few dollars here and there. What will people think of me if I do X, Y, Z? And so that to me is where we get to redefine what dangerous means in our cushy modern world, and then take it on and realize we've got a lot more to live for.
Yeah, but you use that provocative language, almost like, well, I'm going to push you off the ledge to go be dangerous. And then in reading your book, you make it very safe to try new wings, to try new things.
Yeah, I think it is. Thanks you. I think that's a good way to look at it too. Is that when we really zoom out and take a look at it, we realize, gosh, we're so fortunate. We really are so fortunate. Even I mean, even the people that are less fortunate today compared to where we were decades ago, we're in a much higher place of privilege all the way around. So the, it bothers me that more and more of us are in a state of anxiety and depression, and we're not utilizing all of the gifts that we've been given. And so I think it comes back to, we've got to challenge this idea of what it really means to be threatened and to go live for what we really want. Our life's too short.
Yeah, so you and I have talked about this a number of times, but about commitment. We are committed to something. It's really not true to say oh, I'm not committed to this, we're usually committed to something. And in a lot of our lives, we're committed to the comfort, we're committed to playing small, we're committed to staying safe. And it's looking at that and telling the truth about where we're actually putting our life force and our energy and our resources to move it to something different.
I would say that, when somebody says, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, and it's like, that's not entirely true. They're usually willing to do whatever it takes as long as it's not uncomfortable, as long as it doesn't jeopardize their time or energy or money, as long as it doesn't make them look like a moron. And if we start to find those areas and say, well, here's the place where I'm unwilling to be a little uncomfortable. Here's the place where I'm unwilling to take this risk, or I'm unwilling to be laughed at or criticized. If we just really look at it, we can start to see, you know what? I don't want to live my life that way. I don't want to be committed. I really don't need to be that comfortable. I don't really need to be that safe. I don't really need to be that accepted. It's boring. Um, and so I think what I wanted to do in the book was just to slow down and take a look at those areas and say, is this really what you want to settle for? Is this level of, like, creating this box for yourself so that you're continuously comfortable and safe and accepted?
There's a tell in the chapter on power that really got me, that you can't really ignore it. And you talk about, how do you know you're misusing power? How does it, like, so talk about what you see power is, and then how do we know, what are the tells that we're misusing power?
I would say power is two key components. It's first recognizing, what do I want, and then really taking responsibility for that. So most of the time we're still acting like infants, where we make a big racket. We hope that if we bitch and moan and complain, um, that somebody else will come along and figure it out for us, whether that's our partner, it's our job, it's the government, it's some other entity out there is going to come along and do the work to say, hey, you know what? You're not happy. So I'm going to take responsibility, figure out what you want, and then I'm going to do it for you. And most of us are going through our lives in that way in some unconscious form. And so the way that we know that we are misusing our power or we're giving it up completely is that we end up feeling trapped or drained or isolated or stressed out or bored. Those are those experiences, the things we're trying to numb ourselves to, the things we're trying to avoid, the things we're tired of feeling. Those are the doorways for us to pivot and say, all right, well, if I'm feeling trapped, then what would allow me to feel free? If I'm feeling drained, what would allow me to feel alive? If I'm feeling isolated, I want to, then what would have me be connected? If I'm feeling stressed out or bored, where's peace of mind for me? And so it has us come back and say, all right, this is pissing me off. So what is it? If I don't want this, then what is it that I do want? And then how am I going to take full responsibility for it? Most of the time that feels like a burden, but that burden is actually our power. We just want to give it away. Here, you do it. I don't want to deal with this stuff. But if we're really willing to look at it, say, you know what? That's my power. That's not something to give away.
So, when I was just reading in a writing course that to do really good writing, the reader needs to have an epiphany every 1,000 pages. And I thought, oh, Tripp's book does that every 1,000 pages. I'm like, fuck, oh my god, that's right, that's right. And this piece about power to me is almost everybody I talk to out in the corporate world, out in the regular world, is bored, is feels drained, feels trapped, right? So that was such an indictment that like putting your face in it, like you can't ignore that you have all the signposts that you're powerful and you're not using it for your good. And the way you just described it as like it's the gateway to figure out how to find your way out, taking responsibility for it. All right, I built this machine, now I can build it differently is to me the first step.
Yeah. And I think most of us don't look at our interior experiences, how our subjective experiences, how we're feeling as a metric. We're typically like, well, how much am I making compared to that guy? How big is my house compared to those people? Have I done better than my brother or my sister? Have I done better than my ex? It's like we look at those things and say, okay, well, I guess I'm all right. And in the book, I challenged it. No, let's come back. How we know we're on track is whether we feel trapped, drained, isolated, stressed out, or bored. Those are the things that we start to recognize. We put those as gauges on our dashboard and we're checking in because what we ultimately want is the opposite of those, to feel free, to feel alive, to feel loving and connected, to feel peace of mind. I don't know anybody that says, no, I don't want to feel free. No, I don't want to feel alive. No, I don't want to feel loving and connected. No, I don't want to have peace of mind. So if we know we're playing for those things, then the game suddenly changes and we can find those opportunities today instead of playing the rat racer and hoping one day we'll cross some magical finish line and finally given permission to have those experiences.
Yeah, so in my world, the way out of that is a midlife crisis because the way you present it is there's an incremental way of building your way out of those things. For me and the people that I talk to, the midlife crisis is a result of not taking the incremental steps to be more free, to be more alive, to be less drained, right? It's, I got to blow things up in order to feel those things because I'm not willing to have one difficult conversation with my wife. I'm not willing to set a boundary with work or change my career. I got to blow things up. That's the only way I'm going to get the energy to change this inertia.
Yeah, and I think that's sad because it ultimately creates a dramatic bind for us. Either I stay in this hellhole or I have to blow up my entire life. Oh well, I'll just stay stuck. And there's
But they don't. Nobody. They don't. They get sick. They get heart disease. They get cancer, or they blow things up. You just don't stay there in that dullness forever. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know if I think people can tolerate it though for an incredibly long time until they get sick or another thing comes along to shoehorn it out of there. But in terms of taking responsibility and recognizing, anytime somebody comes to me and says I got to blow up my life or I have to do this huge 180, I'm always like, why? Why? Why would that really be the case? Because the years that I've been doing stuff, most of the time when we course correct or we make a transition, it's really 15 to 30 degrees off. Even your life, you're still working with corporate people. You're still using a language and you're still involved in a community that you're really familiar with. even though you've had a drastic change in so
Right.
many ways. So the fear, the big dramatic idea is that we have to do some big 180. And so we stay stuck. We might stay stuck for 6 months or 6 years believing that thought. That's 6 months and 6 years we'll never get back.
How do you help people take the first couple of steps instead of blowing things up? Take the first difficult step, have that conversation, research a career. Because I love it. You know, when you talk about when you talk about passion, and you give an example of one of the guys you were coaching who said, "I don't have the passion to do this anymore." You're like, do you really need passion to do these two steps? Right? You help people make these small steps without having to do all the dramatic stuff, do the big, scary, audacious stuff. Make a small step.
I think most of the time when we just break it down and we look at what we would do now if we had the green light, if we had the inspiration, if we had the passion, if somebody had given us permission, most of the time it's a phone call, it's an email, it's something mundane. There's nothing heroic. It's not like we got to storm the beach and plant the flag. It's nothing. It's usually really boring. So
I was coaching a guy who wanted to quit his corporate job. He says, "I want to be an Airbnb mogul." He goes, "But I can't quit my job yet." I said, "Great. Have you looked at a YouTube video yet about Airbnb?" Like,
yeah.
no. Have you taken out a book out of the library? No. Why don't we start there?
Well, I think this is where we get in our own way, and it's the egoic part. It's that third commitment is that we have to look good. And even if we're going to shift gears and try something else, there's a part of us like, and it's got to be heroic. It's got to be a big, or I can't look like a loser. I can't go backwards. So a lot of us are creating this change in our lives as if there's an audience, as if there's somebody that really gives a damn what we're doing. And I find that incredibly crippling. So it's just like, well, what if there was nothing to prove to anybody, not even yourself, not even to your inner critic, not to your dad, not to your dead mother, not to anybody, and just come back to what would you do today? And there's a sobering aspect to that, which is like, oh, wait, nobody's watching. Nobody really cares. It's like, yeah, now go do it. Now go do the big thing you want to do because you've just taken those chains off with this egoic idea that anybody gives a shit.
Yeah, in the same vein, again, I keep pulling stuff out of the book because I really think you illustrated things that we've read in other books in such a good way. So you say, you know, it sucks to learn how to swim, but it's great to swim, right? It sucks to learn how to play guitar, but it's great to play guitar, right? So embracing the suck and making those incremental changes, for me, that was really key when I started the podcast. You were my first interview for Mastering Midlife. You have been doing it for a long time, and you're already at the top of the game. And I'm comparing myself to you in my first 10 podcasts, right? 100, you know, it took 50 podcasts for me to realize, oh, now I got something going here. Now I'm starting to do. Took 100 podcasts for me to go, wow, I know what I'm doing now, right? And what happened was in the rest of my life, people started to say, you know, you're really much more grounded in what you teach and what you do. You're much more confident in every other area by slowly doing something and learning something over time. But that was really cool for me. It was like, that's such a simple thing. It sucks to learn how to swim, and it's great to swim.
And I think it comes back to that egoic part, which is most of us don't want to feel like a noob again. When we're new and we're not in look at how many of us have built our little ivory towers around our knowledge, around our status, our title, or whatever. And we get precious with that as we get into 30s and 40s and our middle age. It's like, well, I'm not going to start over. I'm not going to be a noob again. I'm not going to go backwards. Who am I without my title? How many of us have lost jobs or stepped out of a career and been like, who am I without this job? It's terrifying. And so the idea of starting something new and learning something new and going through that suck and realizing, hey, maybe my ass doesn't look so good from this angle, that can be crippling for a lot of us if we take ourselves too seriously. And so on one level, it's just uncomfortable to learn something new and to screw up, but it's another when we can't get over ourselves and say, you know what, I'm not gonna look great doing this for a while. I'm gonna fall flat on my face a few times. But I think that's what separates the pros from the amateurs. And I think that's why it's easy to say, I'm going to go do XYZ, but very few actually will. It's not that it's that hard. It's just that most of us are unwilling to go through that discomfort.
So how do you get yourself to go through that discomfort? Stephen Pressfield wrote a whole series of books on resistance and garden variety resistance. And in the beginning of his first book, he talks about how alcoholism and drug addiction were basically just resistance to him writing his first book. How do we find that strength to move from the fear to the strength to the ability to actually create?
I think we have to quit bullshitting ourselves about how long we have to live. I really do. Like when we, because I think there's a part of us like, yeah, you know what, I'll get around to that when the time's right. I'll get around to that when I've done this other thing. And we just keep kicking the can down the road as if we have this time. Now, for me, that the one true thing that we can always count on is our mortality. So it's like, well, am I going to waste my time worrying about XYZ? And if not, then what is it that I really want to commit to? Is it that I really want to explore in this lifetime? And it really helps me. It polarizes me. It says, okay, well, this other stuff isn't important, and this stuff is. And I can take that perspective and then bring that into my daily life. Most of the guys I talk to, they throw around this word, oh, I want to be aligned. I want to have alignment in my life. And I think that's what we're really speaking to, is that when our values, oh, this is what it's important to me in my lifetime, align with what we spend our time with on a day-to-day basis. If I say that I value X, Y, and Z in my life, but then I go to work and I'm doing nothing, I'm just a cog in the in the system, and I'm not really moving towards anything, and I don't have any meaning, we feel out of alignment. But so I want to come back to this idea of when we understand that our lives are finite. It stops us from dicking around, and we'll dick around to the degree that the system that we're in allows us to dick around. As long as we have money to do it, as long as we got people around us that encourage us to dick around, we'll do it. But at some point, we have to set the boundary and say no more dicking around.
You and I have two mutual friends who died young, James Butler, and my voice catches every time I say his name, and Rafael Bajerno. And I keep things on my altar behind me from them. God damn it, every time I mention them, I get all fucked up. But anyway, I keep things on my altar to remind me that they were brilliant men with gifts. They were just pouring out into the world, and they were done at 28 years old and at 40 years old. Like they were just done. And I'm almost 58. I'm still here. So if I'm still here, then I got time to create, like today. And so I actually keep those things with me to remind me that I'm here. I get to create now, and I don't know if I'll be here tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that can give us a sense of peace, right? It's not, oh, I'm going to have a long life and I'll be able to check all the boxes. It's just like, well, is today in alignment, right? That's what gives us a sense of peace. Or is like, you know what, I just pissed away today. And there's a downside to this. There's a shadow side to this where we just live in perpetual fear of like, oh my God, I don't want to waste my life. And there's this scarcity mindset. And I don't think it needs to be that. I think there's a sweet spot here where it's like, yeah, let's use it. Because for me, again, it comes back to those experiences. Does this have me feel alive? Does this have me feel free? Does it have my heart blasted open? Does this give me peace of mind? Because if it's not for that, we could go create this audacious goal, and it's just another thing that tortures us. And I see that a lot where some people they attach their well-being to accomplishing some big, meaningful, purposeful idea, but it's not what really has them feel more alive.
You also talk about being in alignment with your actions gives you strength. It gives you something more to work with.
Yeah, I when we're working against ourselves, and that we have to bargain with ourselves. I'm going to get to that one day. I'm going to go around. It's like it just drains us. It taxes us over and over. That waiting. Oh, I'm waiting. I'm hiding out. I've lived like that. It's terrible. It's a terrible way to live. Um, when I think one of the big things is that people think that once I accomplish this thing, then I'll finally be at peace. But what I found to be most true is just when I align my actions, knowing that I'm working on this thing, that my day did something to contribute to that thing, we find that peace and we find that aliveness and we find that ease that comes. And it's like the goal, whatever that, if you're into goals and that's the thing, it could be years down the road, but just knowing that we did something that moved towards that today, when our head hits the pillow at night, it's like, yeah, that was awesome. That's good.
I think that's the
Good work
difference
today.
between working really hard and pushing a boulder up a hill. Doesn't mean
Mhm.
that we're not going to work hard. Doesn't mean we're not going to, put a bunch of grit into the whole thing. It just has a very different quality.
Yeah, and I think for those that feel like they're pushing a boulder up the hill, then it's like, okay, well, what am I? That's the fear mindset, right? That's where we could start to challenge the idea that um, if I didn't, what would life mean if you didn't push this boulder up the hill? Well, then I wouldn't have enough money and I wouldn't live in the nice house. Or what will they think of me? My parents always wanted me to be a doctor, and I'm, what my friends and blah blah blah. There's always that stuff. The fear is what's driving us to push the boulder up the hill. And I find that it's much more bold to acknowledge, say, wait a second, this just isn't in alignment with who I am. Life's too short.
Brene Brown wrote the book Daring Greatly, and then she wrote the book Rising Strong. Uh, Daring Greatly was where, go out and try new things, go be bold, go be audacious, and get in the arena, get bloody, right? And then she said she had to write Rising Strong because a bunch of people called her and said, I dared greatly and I crashed and burned. Right?
Yeah.
I dared greatly and I failed, right? So this isn't like this, you're going to dare, you're going to be bold, and it's going to be all roses. Like there's a reason people don't stick their necks out.
Yeah. I think that's the part where this is where it's fun to do it with other people. When we fall down with others, we tend to laugh. Like if you ever go roller skating by yourself and you fall down, it's not really funny. If you're roller skating with other people and you're all falling down, it's funny. Right?
That's
There's
like a cohort is a good thing.
Yeah. And it's like, "Oh, you fell down too. Okay, well, I'm not the weirdo." Right? And then we realize that as long as you get back up and you keep going and you learn something from the fall, then there was never part of the plan to not fall. It was never part of the plan that we wouldn't tolerate a face plant here and there. And so I think that's part of the discomfort is if you build it into the plan that there's going to be some face plants, then it's okay. But I think that part of us, it's like, I can only do this if I get it 100% right. That's fragile. That's not going
I
to
don't
work.
want to skip over that. Put it in the plan that there's going to be face plants, that you're gonna fail. For any entrepreneur, for anybody who's trying anything new, our mutual friend Tony Benici really gave me an epiphany when we were talking about exercising in our 50s. Because I'm like, I don't fucking lift weights anymore because I just keep getting hurt. And he said, whenever you get hurt, when if you're going to be a lifelong athlete, you've got to anticipate you're going to get hurt. And now, what is your workaround so that you can heal and get better and get back? And it just changed my mindset because I thought, oh, what's wrong with me? No matter what I do, I keep getting hurt. Oh, that's part of being an athlete, is getting hurt, rehabbing, getting back on the field. So, I think that analogy works really well.
Yeah, and I think that in the in this space where we're talking about creating changes in our life or in our business or in our relationships, that um, I think we learn the most from those, and I hate to romanticize that stuff because it looks like those posters people put on the wall, and it's like, oh, you get up after you fail, but it really is like those become the thing that they suck at the time, but that becomes the thing that sticks out to us, and it's what we offer to others. Is if we want to have meaning in our lives, we're not going to look at the bright spots. We're going to look at the places where we had to dig deep and like, what the hell am I doing, and why am I doing this? And those will be the places where we connect most with what we want, but also where we connect and help others and impact them.
When I talk to people, I tell them the worst things that ever could have happened to me, the things that I was terrified to happen to me, or life circumstances happened. And when I went through them, they sucked, and they sucked worse than I thought they would. Right? It was like peeling my skin off. And in hindsight, they were the best things that ever happened to me, quote unquote, spiritually. So, like, for my strength, for my ability to be in life. It's why we're recording this in the time of the coronavirus. It's why I've been homeless. I've been all these things, and so I can ride this roller coaster that people are on because I already know that life is unpredictable, that we are going to face plant and all that. So those I can say with experience, you know what? I know you're going through hell right now, and I can promise you this is going to be gold 5 years from now. I can promise you. And right now, doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, it reminds me of a conversation I was having with a client yesterday who 3 years ago we were digging around talking about the work that he was doing, and he was sick of being um, like a freelancer for folks, and his dream was to start a business, and we were kicking around. He's like, "Oh, well, I got this one idea, and but that's like my pet project." I'm like, "Tell me about it." Ended up being like, I was like, that sounds like a really like if you could do anything. He's like, oh, I would love to do this, but I'm too afraid. What are you afraid of? Well, people not liking it, falling apart. It was too close to his heart. He was used to doing work that didn't mean anything to him. But then he was
And this
tired of
is his
feeling
baby. If he brings it out and people say it's ugly, shit, what else do I got?
right. So along the path, fast forward, he's making 300 grand a year with it now, just a few years later through our work together. But what I've noticed is that through all the ups and downs that we've been through in this journey, the challenge has been to integrate the story that he goes through ups and downs. He goes through these challenges. He slays dragons.
Mm.
And so when he comes to me, he's like, oh my God, this XYZ is happening today. Part of my job is to be like, don't you remember you're the dragon slayer? You were the guy that pulls out the sword and cuts heads off. Like this is part of what you do. So I'm gonna see you as that as we go forward. You may not be in touch with that, and I think that most of us forget that we've slayed dragons and we've gone through these dips and we've gone through these valleys because we're so focused on the fear and the what we may lose ahead. But I find it so valuable to be like, this sucks, and I'll figure it out. I always have. I've always figured it out. I've always come through on this stuff. And I just find that's a great place to start, is to remember that we've gone through those things instead of, I can't tolerate another, uncomfortable scenario.
Yeah, I've done it before, right? So I can do it. I can do it again. But it's also really good to have people to remind you. So having a coach, having friends, having a group of people. You run masterminds for men so that they have a cohort of people to go try new things with, right?
Yeah. It's like, what do you have set up in your life so that your bullshit story that you're weak or you're fragile or you can't tolerate any discomfort or that everything is so threatening or you're so precious, like what do you have set up in your life so those stories can't exist, at least not for very long? And I find that those are the things that are far more detrimental to us than any of the challenges we're going to face out in the world.
Yeah, and if you're listening right now and I'd like you to take a second and really think, what do you have set up in your life to help you with this? Who's in your life? What does your posse look like, in order to be able to put anything that Tripp is talking about now into action?
Versus what we typically have set up in our life, which is I got to support the story that I'm fragile. I can't support it. I can't have any discomfort. I've always got to be right. I've always got to be special. I've always got to be whatever, like fill in the blank. That's usually what we're designing our lives to do unconsciously. I raise my hand. I do that too. But it's one of the reasons why my wife loves to come along and pop my bubble every few weeks. So it's just
And that's why you marry someone who'll come and pop your bubble every few weeks.
right. Yeah. Yeah. It's not
Right?
always fun. I don't say I enjoy it, but I recognize it's what keeps me strong.
Well, the other piece is the maverick part. Is I'm going to go it alone. I shouldn't need help. I shouldn't have to ask for help. I shouldn't have to be vulnerable. That's the other pitfall to fall into.
That's my pitfall. What are you talking about? I own that one. That's me.
I, I hate to say it, but I have the same. If I didn't have the same mastermind for the last 5 years, every Friday at 2:00, of the same people who call me on my shit, or if they don't hear from me, they call me, fourth. I don't know what I do because I don't like to ask for help. I talk to people about asking for help, but again, the cobbler's kid's got no shoes, right? I
Yeah.
can do this. I'm Superman.
I hired another coach yesterday. Like it's just, and I meet with two other coaches. Um, we've been meeting every week, especially during this coronavirus thing. Like you just do what strengthens you. Period. You don't wait until you're in the mood. You don't wait until the other stuff's done. All the dishes are clean. Like you start with the things that that strengthen you. And I think again that's more of the mature stance here, which is, am I going to always make excuses and keep doing the things that make me weak instead of I'm going to put the things that make me strong up front.
So yeah, I can't think of it off the top of my head now because you say most people want to be free, they want to be alive, they want to be what is your saying with that?
Freedom, aliveness, love, and peace.
Right, and then what I is instead of really going for a goal, sit there and look for what makes me feel more alive, what would make
Today.
me feel more free. I found that to be really simple.
Yeah. It is that simple.
Right? It's like I need to know the new fad diet. Well, more green leafy vegetables, less sugar. Done. Right? This one is like, what makes me feel more alive? What will make me feel more free? What will make me feel more love?
And it's a day-to-day thing. I think our brains are hardwired to like, I want to be set it and forget it, which is why this idea of put me on the path of education for X number of years and put me in the corporate ladder and put me on the chain to FU money or whatever that thing is satisfying, because it means we can turn off our self leadership. We don't have to think for ourselves anymore. We don't have to take responsibility. But when we slow down and we understand that all of our hopes and dreams just mean that we are playing for freedom, aliveness, love, and peace, it relaxes things. Why would I say that? Because I've met a lot of people that have made their quote dreams come true and they ended up feeling the opposite of those things. Instead of freedom, they felt trapped. Instead of alive, they felt drained. Instead of loving and connected, they felt isolated. Instead of uh, peaceful, they felt stressed out or bored. So I've seen all
What
these
did they What
dreams.
did they do that that didn't work?
They checked out of their emotional experience. They committed to the outcome instead of their experience. They never knew what they were really playing for. So it was going to be, oh, it must be about the money, it must be about the house, it must be about the status, it must be about blah 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 blah. They put their big Southern California vision core, foam core board up on the wall and put their head down and knocked it out and made it happen. I think that's fantastic. But what they did is they ignored their internal experience. That takes effort. That takes emotional intelligence. Most people are trying to check out of their experience. They want to look at their screen. They want to smoke weed. They want to drink. They want to chase ass, like whatever that thing is. They're trying to get out of their experience. And so in the book, I'm like, look, if you understand that what you're playing for are these experiences, then come back to them and just say, hey, look, I can play for the future that means something to me. But I can also just say, look, if I want to feel free, then what would have me feel more free today? If I want to feel alive, what would bring aliveness today, et cetera, et cetera. And that may seem really simple, but it is. It's that effective because most of us are hanging these experiences out on the other end of some magical finish line, and that's the trap.
The freaking cliche is life happens now, right? It's life happens now. There's only now, there's no later. And if I want to feel more alive now, what do I need to do now? That will change my complete life experience.
This is a luxury to have this conversation.
Sure.
Let's have it. If it's available to us, why are we still in this robotic, threat aversive place where we're trying to outrun this idea that we have to, some big monster's trying to kill us all the time? Let's wake up and realize how good that we've got it and that we can shift the game to understand what we're really playing for. We don't have to settle just for survival. We can start to move our lives more in line with what actually fulfills us.
If I edited this podcast down to 60 seconds and all we could do is release 60 seconds out into the world, what would you want people to walk away with? I won't count your silence in the 60 seconds.
I was going to say that would be the most Buddhist approach. Oh, I don't know, 60 seconds. I think we're waiting to love. I think that's the biggest one. I think that we make life way harder than it needs to be. We make loving way harder than it needs to be. When I talk to people who have done incredible things and had huge quote success, the thing that they're usually yearning for is love, is to know that people actually love them for who they are, not what they've done. The saddest thing for me is to see that people have done so well for themselves and they're still lonely and they still don't know themselves. And I find that incredibly sad.
Yeah.
So I think that success and the things we want to play and the things we want to create, like that's the game, like that's the canvas for us to paint on. But yeah, we got to really check ourselves if we don't feel more loving to others, and whether that's the brothers in our lives, the sisters in our lives, our actual lovers, our kids, or whatever. I just feel like, God, what a waste if we're uh, always at odds with one another, etc.
Thank you for coming through. That's a big piece of your book that was unexpected for me, and I loved it. That you came down to that, and how important that is, because it's not manly and macho and all those things, but it's what life is made of. And I don't care if you look like Dwayne the Rock Johnson, right? That's what you want,
We all want that.
right?
We
Totally.
all want it.
There's a really stupid show on Netflix called Too Hot to Handle. And it's about these really smoking hot people that are get put on an island to go win some money. and they find out that they can't have sex. And that's the whole kicker, right? And they put them through these paces, and they start putting the guys, these buff guys who can get any chick they want, all this stuff, and they start putting them through a bunch of the men's work that you and I have done. And it looks like one of these really stupid eye candy shows, which it starts out as. And then they break these men down to little boys crying on the beach, hugging each other. And I'm like, even them, that's all they ever wanted, was a bro to love. And it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we don't have to have this huge success. We don't have to build this company. We don't have to do all the things that we think we have to do in order to feel that deep sense of peace and wholeness. A lot of times it's available to us. It's a conversation away. It's an uncomfortable conversation. It's a risky conversation. It's oh shit, what is my bro going to think of me? What is my friend going to think of me? What is my wife going to think of me if I have, we'd rather go do the 20, 30 years of slaving away than avoid that sweaty 5-minute conversation.
I've had those sweaty 5-minute conversations, and I've built lifelong relationships. I've had those sweaty conversations with another guy, and they looked at me and rolled their fucking eyes, and I felt like the biggest fucking douche in the world. Right? Like, both have happened. I've been rejected when I've opened my heart and God, man, I just love you and I really want to be friendly. Like, and it's like, what the fuck's wrong with you? And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry.
Face plants are optional, right?
Right.
So,
but it was a couple uncomfortable conversations that you and I became friends, and I just so appreciate that, because my life is, as I started the podcast with, so much of what I've created has come out of our friendship, and that's the effect that you have on people. So tell me about what you bring to the world and how people can find you.
Easiest way to find me, or probably the obviously the book is available. You can go to dangerousbookstore.com. The New Man podcast is available. There's tons of resources there. And then if you would like to learn more about the coaching offerings that I have, you can go to tripplanier.com.
So all of that stuff is going to be in the show notes, so people can just click and go find you. Like I said, I want thousands and thousands of your books out in the world, and I'm going to give them away because I do think it's that good. The New Man podcast is a standard that everybody else should live up to, because it's not the same freaking conversations that some of these people have on some of the other podcasts. Just so refreshing and so good. So Tripp, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your heart and your soul.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that.
And we didn't laugh as much as we usually do, but I had notes for this. I had notes. I wanted to interview an author, not Tripp Lanier. I wanted the author, Tripp Lanier. So it's really cool.
The author Tripp Lanier still has to go clean out the compost bin and do the dishes right now. So I don't know if that lives up to your image of.
No, that's all. That's awesome. All right, and to everybody else, listen. If you like the podcast, please share it. Please leave a review, and tell people about it. And I just love you. I appreciate your time and attention. Have a great rest of the day.